Topping the 10:30 hour, as we know, Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. But what now?
Trump's sentencing is scheduled for July 11th. That's 4 days before the Republican convention. He faces 4 years in prison for each of those 34 counts. Joining us now to talk more about this is legal expert Terry Connors. Terry, thank you for being here. What we just talked about was the possible sentence in this case. We'll pick it up right there. What is your expectation for when Judge Marchand gets back to the bench on July 11th? Because that 4 years was the maximum. Do we see Trump spending any time in prison?
Very unlikely. It's a first-time offense for him. It's a felony that was aggravated up from a misdemeanor itself. The counts will run concurrently. You almost never get a consecutive sentence like that. So he's looking at from probation to 4 years incarceration. He'll get probation.
Do you think that would be different if it was Joe Citizen, me or Kelsey or you out there, first-time conviction, all the same except for, of course, the notoriety?
Well, Trump better hope that he gets the same outcome as a first-time conviction, because that's what it would be. That conviction is a staple of their prosecution, but so many times it ends up in a probationary term.
Okay, so if he gets probation and he gets elected as our next president, how could that influence his or impact his presidency?
Well, interesting. Probation requires certain reporting obligations.
Yes.
So he would be assigned a probation officer. He'd have to check in. They can work out various situations. They can even move probation to another district, whether it's D.C. or whether it's Florida, and they can accommodate that. Basically, it wouldn't really interrupt what he has to do, but it would be, a bit of an inconvenience.
We were talking during the break about how fascinating this deliberation process was. And of course, attorneys all over the world want to know those little tidbits and clues and cues from juries about what they can expect. But you can almost never predict a jury. However, some interesting things happened over the course of the past 10 hours or 10 hours of deliberations. The notes, what did any of that tell you?
So without question, that's the area that fascinates lawyers, because you want to be able to predict if you can. You can't really do it because jurors are independent bodies of 12 people. But for me, once I saw that they called for the testimony of David Pecker, that said to me, they're taking Michael Cohen, putting him aside, and looking to see, can we corroborate what the evidence is? That's the first point. The second point was, if you remember the summation of Joshua Steinglass, he led them directly to that testimony. He told them, look to that for corroboration. You don't have to worry about Cohen if you don't believe him, because we corroborate every document with testimony.
And with how fast they deliberated, that generally can tell you something as well.
So I'm sitting at my desk with my TV on in the office, and I'm saying to myself, it's 4:20, he's going to send them home. And it's going to be a Friday afternoon verdict. That happens in a high percentage of times because the jury wants to go home for the weekend. And then all of a sudden, they have a verdict.
And that told you, do you think that told you enough of what you needed to know, being the fact that it was 10 hours of deliberation over just 2 days?
No, that kind of turned me around.
You'd never know.
Because that fast a verdict could go either way. But when they asked for 30 additional minutes to fill out the forms, so now I know that it's not going to be just a straight line, not guilty. We thought it would be a mixed bag, some guilty, some not guilty. As it turns out, they were all guilty.
Were you surprised about the inclusion of Michael Cohen to the extent that he was? He played a massive role, at least over the course of days of direct and cross-examination and recross and everything else. But the government said they didn't need him to convict, and maybe it turns out they didn't, because as you mentioned, the jury asked for separate testimony. But wasn't there a thought, especially legally, given how Cohen's past, his checkered past of being convicted of lying, putting him on the stand was a big risk?
But they had to put him on the stand.
They had to, right?
They had to. He was the only direct link to Trump's approval of the deal. So Cohen, it was a foregone conclusion. The question was, how would they dress him up with all the other witnesses, the other documents? But they had to put him on, and they had to take the punishment that was going to be delivered to him. Easy witness to cross-examine.
Being a convicted felon takes away some of your rights in this country. That includes, in many states, your right to vote. Will he be able to vote in this upcoming election? And then what other things are taken away from him being this convicted felon?
Well, it depends upon where he wants to vote from. If he wants to vote from Florida, the rule in Florida essentially is if you are not serving a term in prison, you can vote. Or if you finish your term in prison, you can vote. You don't have that type of a disability. But there are other disabilities, none of which would really interfere with him. He does have the right to apply in New York for what's called a Certificate of Relief from Disabilities. Judge Merchan could give that to him at the time of sentencing if he wished to do it. Although with all he's said about Judge Merchan, I don't know if he's going to look for any breaks from him.
Trump's attorneys have already said they intend to appeal that in New York State 30 days after the sentence is handed down on July 11th, so that will move forward. What is that process like for this type of a case? And has anything stuck out as you've observed this case that would be grounds for an appeal?
Well, the appeal will get filed within 30 days. All right, then you have 90 days to perfect your appeal. And you can have some extensions if you wish. The question will be, will they push it and pursue it, or will they let it run its normal course? Normal course is 9 months to a year for an appeal to conclude, all right? So it'll take some time. It's hard to say what they would do, but I think they'd likely let it play out and make the record. What stood out to me and what will be the subject of the appeal will be the jury charge itself. That's the most fertile area for a reversal of a conviction. And they'll look to see whether or not Judge Merchan did give the right charge and instructions to the jury, or whether there were some errors contained within. You may remember there was one aspect of it where he said didn't have to be unanimous. They'll go right for that jugular.
Interesting. I feel like I could talk to you all night.
I know.
Terry
There's a lot here, yeah.
But we're getting that rap in our ear, unfortunately. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Terry.